Envy does not roar. It smolders. It creeps like smoke through the smallest cracks of your heart, warming the walls from within until you no longer know whether the heat is coming from you or from what you lack. It is a fire without light, a furnace hidden behind the mask of your thoughts. Look at them, it says. See how easily they breathe, how the world hands them gifts while you scrape and beg. You don't want to harm them, no. You just want what they have. And maybe, just maybe, you want them to notice how much it costs you to watch them live so freely. Everyone has known this heat, the quiet, burning pulse in your chest when someone else receives the life you wanted. A friend whose work is praised when yours was ignored. A stranger whose beauty redefines the room you just entered. A sibling, a colleague, a lover who always seems to win without asking. You smile, but your teeth ache. You nod, but inside something folds in on itself. You call it unfair. You call it motivation. But it is neither. It is hunger, and it grows sharper the more you feed it. We think envy is a fleeting emotion, a passing wave of bitterness. But that is a lie. Envy builds. It stacks like layers of soot on the inner walls of the soul. You don't see it because it feels so familiar. It disguises itself in ambition, in justice, in the language of improvement. I want to be better, you say, but what you really mean is, I want to be them. It turns your gaze outward, always outward, until your own life becomes a blurry reflection in someone else's mirror. And yet, here is the truth we don't want to say aloud. It is the absence within you, projected like a shadow onto the world. It is your deepest fear wearing someone else's smile, that you are not enough, that you are late, that you are unseen. The world becomes a gallery of reminders that you are behind the glass, looking in. The danger of envy is not its cruelty. It is its subtlety. You do not notice it until your entire sense of direction has been rewritten by it. You start to walk not toward joy, but away from someone else's success. You build your life as a rebuttal. You choose paths not because they call to you, but because they will silence a rival. Envy does not ask what is true. It asks what will make you feel superior. And in that moment, you become its puppet. But here's the paradox. The more envy governs your choices, the further you drift from what would make you whole. You forget what you actually desire. You trade your soul for applause in someone else's theater. And the furnace grows. Still, the flame of envy is not impossible to quench. Only by turning inward and asking, what wound am I dressing with this desire? What part of me still believes I am not enough, not loved, not chosen? Not in defeating envy, but in understanding it. This video is not an exorcism. It is a mirror, a quiet room where we will listen carefully to the voice we often try to ignore. The goal is not to shame it, but to learn from it, to use it as a map toward the places we have abandoned within ourselves. Because envy, when examined with clarity, can lead us back to truth. Not the truth of what others have, but the truth of what we still need to claim inside. So let's begin this journey, not with judgment, but with attention. With the soft courage of those who dare to see themselves without disguise. Because before envy destroys, it reveals. And that too can be a gift. Envy is like a shadow that doesn't wait for light. It grows in the dark, feeds on comparisons, and clings to your steps long before you notice it. Imagine a mirror but cracked and dirty, through which you constantly look at others. You do not see them clearly, and yet you cannot look away. Every success they have feels like a reminder of your own lack. Every smile they wear becomes an accusation against your silence. And slowly, without warning, you stop living your life and begin surviving theirs. This is envy, a parasite of the soul that hides behind the curtains of your thoughts and whispers when your guard is down. It never attacks head-on. It waits. It waits until you're tired, unsure, or just a little lonely. Then it presents itself not as hate, but as hurt. Not as arrogance, but as injustice. Why them and not me? Why now and never me? These questions, they seem honest, almost noble. But they rot you from the inside, like a leak you refuse to patch because you believe the boat shouldn't have holes at all. And here's the danger. Envy wears the costume of morality. It doesn't want to build anything. It only wants to tear down. If it could, envy would burn the whole village just to dim your neighbor's lantern. It would destroy beauty, just so you wouldn't have to witness it from the outside. Envy doesn't say, I want more. It says, I want them to have less. And that difference changes everything. Think of it like a fire that doesn't warm, a fire that only burns in your lungs. You breathe it in each time you scroll through a feed or hear about a promotion or see a wedding you weren't invited to. And in that breath, you lose something sacred. You lose the ability to celebrate. You lose the freedom of admiration. Because when envy grows, nothing is ever beautiful again unless it belongs to you. We've all felt it, even those who pretend not to. That tightness in the chest when someone else succeeds, that faint twist of the gut when someone is praised. It's not evil in itself to feel it. Envy is natural, in the same way that hunger is natural. But just like hunger, it must be understood, not obeyed blindly. When you feel envy, you must listen to what it is trying to say underneath the noise. Because most of the time, it is not really about the other. It is about the part of you that feels invisible, undernourished, left behind. There's a wound underneath every envious thought, a sense of not enough love, not enough recognition, not enough peace. But it never works. It never heals. It just distracts. It just fuels the illusion that if others had less, you would finally have more. In daily life, envy creeps in quietly. You hear about a friend's success, and instead of feeling joy, you feel smaller. You watch someone take a risk, and instead of being inspired, you feel mocked. This is not because you are bad. It is because you are hurting in a place that hasn't been spoken to in a long time. Envy is often the voice of neglect. The neglect itself, the dream you buried, the love you stopped believing in. And so when envy speaks, do not ignore it. But also, do not believe it. It is not a compass. It is a flare, a signal that part of you is in the dark. And here's the truth. If you follow envy, it will never lead you to what you need. It will only lead you to resentment, to bitterness, to a slow, quiet death of the spirit. But if you pause, if you look underneath its mask, you might find the courage to ask a better question. Not why them, but what is mine? What is the thing I am meant to build, to protect, to grow? Because envy is not just about others. It's about the way we see ourselves, the way we measure worth, the way we define success. And when those definitions are borrowed, when they are not grounded in something deeper, envy thrives. It thrives in imitation. It withers in authenticity. Which means the most radical act you can do in a world full of envy is not to conquer others, but to return to yourself, to your path, to your pace, to your peculiar rhythm. We live in a culture of comparison, where every moment is ranked, every smile rated, every effort weighed against someone else's highlight reel. It's no surprise envy finds fertile ground here. But that does not mean we must water it. We can step back. We can reorient. We can remember that someone else's light does not dim our own. That we can admire without acquiring. That we can celebrate without conquering. And perhaps, slowly, we can build something better. Not a life free of envy, but a life aware of it, honest about it. A life that refuses to be eaten alive by the need to be seen as the best, and instead seeks to become the most real, the most whole, the most fully alive version of ourselves. Envy is not just an emotion, it is an architecture. A secret chamber we build inside our psyche, where someone else's life becomes the blueprint and our own becomes the prison. Imagine it like a house with no windows, only peepholes through which you spy on your neighbor's garden. Every flower you see there seems brighter than your own. Every ray of sun that touches their leaves feels like a theft from your sky. And so you stop watering your soil, believing it is cursed, while their plants keep growing only because they kept tending. The tragedy of envy is not that it lies. It is that it almost tells the truth. Almost. It shows you real things, real people, real joys. But it hides the cost, the context, the wounds behind those joys. You do not see the risks they took. You only see the rewards. And you start believing the most dangerous story of all, the story that says, life is a race, and you are already too far behind. But life is not a race. It is a canvas, a slow, messy painting where each brushstroke matters, and envy grabs your hand while you paint and pulls it towards someone else's frame. It says, look how smooth their lines are. Look how vivid their colors. Before long, your painting no longer looks like you. There is something almost erotic in the way envy moves. It doesn't storm in, it seduces. It slides into your thoughts like silk, wrapping itself around your desires. You think you are admiring, but you are binding yourself. Binding your value to someone else's approval, your identity to someone else's applause. And soon, you are not just living in your mind, you are performing in theirs. You begin to decorate your life like a stage. Carefully curated successes, posed happiness, filtered ambition. But because you hope someone, somewhere, will envy you too. That is how envy multiplies. It makes us both victim and carrier. We suffer from it and we spread it, not out of malice, but out of emptiness. Because nothing hollows the soul like the belief that only stolen light can make us glow. Let's bring this back to the real. You are sitting at a table, talking with a friend. They tell you they just got into the school you dreamed of. Or they found the love you keep failing to grasp. Your face smiles. But inside, a part of you flinches. You go quiet for a second too long. Then you catch yourself. You congratulate them, but the words feel distant, like they came from another room. Later that night, you replay the moment. And a strange guilt crawls in. You ask yourself why you felt that way, why you couldn't just be happy for them. That moment right there is the crack in the wall, the place where truth might seep through, because envy, as cruel as it is, can become a mirror. It shows us where we still bleed, where we still wait for permission to love ourselves, where we still measure our worth like it's a price tag on someone else's life. And if we have the courage to look through the envy, not with shame, but with tenderness, we may find something beautiful beneath. We may find an unlived desire, a buried hope, a forgotten voice that says, I want more from my life, but I don't know how to ask. That's the spiritual function of envy. Not to condemn, but to awaken. Not to shame, but to illuminate the places we've kept in shadow. But to do this, you must stop blaming the other. Envy thrives on projection. It makes the other the villain, the lucky one, the undeserving star of a film you think you should be in. But the real work begins when you take your eyes off the screen and look at your seat. When you ask what story you are telling yourself about your own life. Is it a story of lack, of missed trains, of second bests? Or is it a story in progress, a draft still being written, a melody still searching for its rhythm? Because envy is a refusal to be where you are. It is a war against your present. It says now is not enough, and neither are you. And every time you believe that voice, you abandon your life. You walk out on your own becoming. You forsake the slow art of becoming whole for the quick drug of imagined superiority. But here's the truth. No one wants to admit, even if you had what they have, the envy would return. It's about disconnection. Disconnection from your core, from your unique path, from your inner compass, and until you heal that link, no achievement will quiet the storm. No title will soothe the ache, no spotlight will feel like home. So what do we do with this force? We turn it inward, not as fire, but as fuel. We let envy point us to what we truly want. Not what we want to possess, but what we want to express. We ask, why does that life attract me? What part of me feels exiled when I see it? And then we don't copy, we create. We create from our hunger, from our emptiness, from our longing to feel alive on our own terms. Because the antidote to envy is not satisfaction, it is connection, not control, but creation. A life that is not defined by others, but illuminated by what is most secretly ours. If envy is a mirror, then shame is the hand that smudges the reflection. It distorts what we see when we dare to look too closely. It whispers not only that we are less than others, but that we are wrong to feel it, and that double weight is unbearable. But maybe the real sickness isn't envy itself. Maybe it's what we do with it when we pretend it isn't there. The silence around it is what lets it grow. It becomes a vine crawling silently through the house of the soul, invisible until it blooms into resentment. Resentment toward those who shine, toward those who try, toward those who simply dare to be different. And the more you ignore the vine, the more it wraps around the pillars of your life. One day, you're not just jealous of your friend's success. You're angry when they talk about it. You're not just comparing your path. You're trying to sabotage theirs in your mind, hoping they trip so the shame quiets down. Here's the cruel paradox of envy. It starts by admiring the light, but ends by despising it. Not because the light hurt you, but because it reminds you of how long you've kept yourself in the dark. You could have painted. You could have danced. You could have started that project, written that book, confessed that love. But you didn't. Let's take a real-life example. You're scrolling through your phone late at night. You see someone from your past post something. They're not a celebrity, not even a close friend, just someone whose path briefly touched yours. But now, a new city, a confident smile, a project you secretly wanted to start but never did. You keep staring, not because you care, but because something in you clenches. A tightness, a burn, almost physical. You feel your throat close, you feel your chest sink. You put the phone down and you tell yourself stories. That they got lucky, that it's fake, that you didn't really want that life anyway. And the truth is, you're not angry at them. You're angry at the version of yourself that never bloomed. This is the philosophical wound envy reveals. It is not a social wound. It is metaphysical. It touches the core of our being. Because deep down, we all want to be radiant. Not in the sense of being admired, but in the sense of feeling congruent, of walking a life that reflects our inner rhythm, of feeling that our days are not betrayals of our essence. And when someone else seems to live that way, we feel the rupture between who we are and who we could have been. That rupture is what envy feeds on. It is the crack in the mirror where the self begins to doubt its shape. But here's the hidden grace. That crack is also where the light can enter. If you dare to stop hiding it, if you dare to say, yes, I feel envy, but I refuse to drown in it, I will walk through it. I will trace it back to its root. And I will plant something new in its place. Because envy is not the end. It is the threshold, a border between the false life and the true one, the one borrowed from others and the one waiting inside. But crossing that border hurts, because you must admit how much time you have lost, how many masks you've worn, how many talents you have left untouched because you were too busy watching someone else unfold theirs. There is a strange intimacy in facing your envy. Like washing a wound you've hidden for years. It stings, but it also cleanses. You realize your envy is telling you something sacred. It is showing you the shape of your unlived life. It is the negative space of your desire, the outline of your soul's hunger. And instead of choking it, you can name it. Give it air. Give it color. Give it form. Imagine if, instead of comparing, you started listening. Instead of copying, you started creating. Instead of counting what they have, you started counting what you love. But what makes you feel alive? The texture of your own rhythm, the flavor of your own breath, the movement of your own voice when it's no longer imitating. That is where freedom begins. Envy only wins when it keeps you silent, when it makes you afraid of your own longing. But longing is not weakness. It is the compass of the soul. It tells you where the fire is, where the dance is, where the music still waits for you. You are just on pause, held in the grip of a story that is not yours. So rewrite it. Start where you are, not in someone else's shadow, but in your own raw truth. Feel the envy, trace it, dissect it, and then let it become the sketch of your next chapter. Because beneath every bitter comparison is a buried calling. And envy is just the voice asking again and again, will you finally choose to live your own life? There is a deeper layer to envy that most people never dare to touch. Beneath the surface of comparison, beneath the stories we tell ourselves about others, there is a haunting question. What if I never become who I could have been? That's the true terror envy exposes. Not the pain of seeing others succeed, but the slow erosion of our own potential. Envy isn't just about others having more. It's about us becoming less and feeling it, viscerally, like a soul crumbling inside a shell that still smiles. Think of a painter who stopped painting years ago. Her brushes are still in a drawer, dry, forgotten, stiff with dust. Every time she sees an exhibition online, a piece of her aches, but she doesn't know what to do with that ache. So instead, she scrolls faster, criticizes, dismisses, or compares. Not because the painting was bad, but because it was good, and that goodness pierced something silent inside her. That painting called out to her abandoned hands, and she couldn't bear to hear it. That's what envy does. It creates a fracture between the self and the self's longing, and that fracture becomes a filter. You stop seeing others for who they are, and you start seeing them as symbols of what you've refused in yourself. You stop admiring. You start interpreting. You build little cages in your mind and lock people in them. They become threats, not mirrors. Competitors, not companions. But here's the twist. The more you project your unlived dreams onto others, the more distant you grow from your own life. You become a ghost inside your own body. A spectator, a judge, never a player. You edit yourself before you even try. You measure instead of feeling. You shrink before you've even moved. And this isn't just sad. It's tragic. Because the world doesn't need copies. It needs imprints. And envy is the acid that erases them before they're even drawn. Now let's bring it back to something real. Imagine you're in a conversation at a dinner table. A friend is telling the group how they finally quit their job to work on their startup. The table cheers. But you sit there, silent, a small smile on your lips, a knot in your chest. You've had an idea like that too, years ago. You remember the excitement, the sketches, the notes, but you let it die. So now you laugh with the group, but inside there's a burn. You tell yourself it's not the same, that your life is fine, that it wouldn't have worked anyway. But a voice inside doesn't believe you. And that voice is the part of you still alive. This is the paradox. Envy is not a weakness, it's a call. A brutal, honest, shame-soaked call to realign. But most of us silence it before it speaks. We cover it with sarcasm. We rationalize it with logic. We bury it under layers of distraction. Because it's easier to scroll than to stare. It's easier to comment than to create. It's easier to judge than to become. But if you look closer, you'll find that envy can be your guide. It points with painful accuracy to the places where you've abandoned yourself. It's not about wanting their life. It's about mourning your own disconnection. Their success is just the canvas. The real story is in your hands. And whether you will choose to use them again. Let's play with an image. Imagine envy as a brush in your hand. But instead of painting with it, you stab yourself each time you see someone else create. It sounds dramatic, but that's what we do, emotionally, psychologically. But what if you dipped that brush in your own palette? What if, instead of attacking yourself with envy, you created with it? What if the color of your jealousy became the pigment of your next beginning? It's not romantic. It's not always inspiring. Sometimes it's raw, shaky, ugly at first. But it's real. And real is rare. The hardest part is accepting that you will have to begin again, not from scratch. From the truth of what you've envied, from the truth of what you've buried, from the truth of what still matters to you, despite the years, despite the silence, despite the shame. And that is what makes this inner work so vital. You're not just trying to feel better, you're trying to feel honest. You're trying to reclaim the thread that envy exposed, the thread that connects your ache to your art, your longing to your direction. And if you follow it, slowly, you begin to remember how it feels to be whole. Because the danger is not in envying others. The danger is in letting that envy become the reason you stop becoming yourself. It's easy to get lost in the noise, in the projections, in the timelines of others. But the most radical act is to stop, to turn inward, to sit with the burn, and to ask, not what do they have that I don't, but what is calling in me that I keep refusing? That question is a doorway, a quiet revolution. And if you walk through it, you will start to build a life that feels less like a performance and more like a poem. And so, envy stops being just a shadow stalking your mind. It becomes a mirror reflecting your unspoken truths, a whisper guiding you back home to yourself. The path won't be easy, nor free of stumbles, but the deeper you go, the lighter you'll feel, because you're shedding not just resentment, but the weight of a life half-lived. This is not about perfection or about winning. It's about returning to your own voice, messy, imperfect, alive. So the next time you feel envy rise like a storm inside you, don't run or hide. Lean in. Trace its shape with tenderness, like a painter learning to see the cracks in the canvas. Let it teach you what you need to know about who you are and who you might yet become. Because beneath the dark force that destroys is the spark that can create. Let's think together, not forever, but just long enough to build something real.